Good morning. Great to be here with you today, here on Facebook, and my camera all situated here on YouTube if you're watching. It's a great morning, a little rainy here in Atlanta right now, but all is good, and we are coming to you right now from Kennesaw, Georgia. It is officially Tuesday, April 28th, 8 a.m., week 7 of quarantine. You may hear some background noise this morning as my sweet 9-year-old daughter is getting her breakfast. She is joining us today. So she's on the other side of this camera eating her breakfast. Kyle Dixon coming to us all the way from Orlando, Florida. Great to have you here this morning, my friend. Kyle is my benefactor of the Zelda coffee mug. David Rowland, good to have you. Not sure if you're watching from the police department or from your house, but always a pleasure, my friend. We're going to be in Mark chapter 7 today, the book of Mark. The New Testament has 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we are reading through the book of Mark. And some of this will have tremendous bearing on cultural events, as is the case when you reread the Bible. And then sometimes you read things and it's just when you read the scriptures, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what's happening with coronavirus and what's happening socially or politically, but it has everything to do with the condition of your heart. And that's going to be today for sure. Good morning, Diana. Great to have you from Illinois. So we got the spread today. Atlanta, Illinois, Florida. We're just covering our bases. Let's go ahead and jump in here. Mark chapter 7. And if you grew up going to church, this is going to be a moment in the scriptures that I think will probably speak to you a bit. Jesus is talking about tradition and the condition of our heart. And if you're like me, I grew up in St. Louis, great Christian family, great Christian home, great church that I grew up in. There is a propensity for us to start out with tradition and then that tradition to become something more than it was ever designed to be. We'll see that here in just a second. Mark chapter 7, verse 5. The Bible says this: the Pharisees and teachers of the law, they asked Jesus, "Why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders instead of eating their food with defiled hands?" He replied, "Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites. As it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. You have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to human traditions." Okay. Now, if you've ever been a part of a church, maybe you're watching, there's a couple people watching right now, I don't even know fully who. You may be a part of a church, you may not. You may just be curious as to what Andy is doing every single day here on Digital Devotionals. Well, every church, every organization, every structure of people, they have traditions that make their organization their organization. I'm not suggesting that the church is simply a business or an organization, but it is an assembly of people. And anytime you have an assembly of people, you have things that make your people your people. Israel in the Old Testament had traditions. There were things that they were called to do that weren't necessarily commandments, but they were traditions designed to help them remember God's faithfulness. They were also traditions that just became part of the DNA of their people group, right? So, for instance, my name is Andy King, and at our house every Christmas, we take our stockings off of the mantle, and in our stocking are envelopes, and in it is a letter that we wrote the year prior, and it's things that we write down in the current year what we're thankful for and what we're believing for the following year. But we look at what we were expecting God to do the prior year. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense. So we open up our envelope, and there's all of the years prior of things that we're asking God to do, we're asking God to be, moving in our lives about, and then we write another one for the year coming up that we will read 12 months down the road. That is a tradition of ours. Almost everybody has some kind of tradition for birthdays or Easter or Christmas or whatever it might look like. In a church service, you may have a tradition of everyone taking communion every single week. Or maybe you have a tradition of, like in our church that I pastor, the majority of the time, communion is not served to you. You get up and you walk down front, and communion is laid out on tables, and you take it and you walk back to your seat. Those are some of the things that make our church our church. It's not about right. It's not about wrong. It's simply tradition. However, as we read here in the scriptures, many times tradition can become something in our heart that it was never meant to become. And the Pharisees in this situation have made tradition holiness. They've made tradition at the sake of everything else, the laws of everything else. They have upheld tradition and they've made it law. So here's the thing to keep in mind for us. When it comes to tradition, tradition is designed to help us remember God's faithfulness. It's designed to help us execute the mission that's in front of us. However, tradition is not commandment. Tradition is not holiness. The propensity of the human heart is to elevate tradition to commandment, and to take commandment and to push it down and de-elevate it, if that makes sense. Can't think of the right word for it, but we elevate one and we push the other down. We de-emphasize it. And so, for instance, sexual purity, that is a commandment in the scriptures. And the reason we have commandments, it's not about remembering God's faithfulness. Commandments, you being holy, for instance, is designed that your life would represent God's character and his nature. There's nothing about that is tradition, right? It's not rooted in time or place or a people group. It is what it is for all time. And when we talk about God's character and his character and nature are unchanging. So his commandments don't change either. When it comes to things like purity, when it comes to things that are considered right or wrong, evil, wicked, good, etc., righteousness, those don't change because they are tied to God's character and his nature. Tradition, however, is tied more to the people group and the elements of who God has called you to walk with than anything else. I'll use another kind of example that a lot of people have heard before. Now, I don't even know if this is technically true, but it's one of those pastor stories that gets passed around, right? And a family has the Thanksgiving turkey, and when they cook the turkey is always cut in half and put in the oven, right? And so one of the kids finally asked me, Dad, why do we cut the turkey in half? And Mom says, well, that's the way, my mom has always done it. It makes the turkey taste better. It makes it, it cooks right, it cooks better. But she got to thinking, and so she asked her mom, and her mom said, well, that's the same thing. It's just how we've always done it. But you've got subsequent generations, and the great-grandma was still alive, and so they asked great-grandma, why do we cut the turkey in half before we put it in the oven? And she said, well, we were so poor and our oven was so small that the only way we could cook the whole turkey was to cut it in half and cook it in two different sections. And you can see how tradition over time, right, it has purpose and it has value, but it may only have purpose and value for a time. And if we're not careful, we'll take that tradition and we will etch it into stone, and then we will use it as legislation for determining who is holy and who is not. And that's what the Pharisees have done. rather than the freedom that comes from the Spirit of God. Worship and really just allowing your heart to focus on God's righteousness and living a holy life. They emphasize all of these external things, the traditions designed to help with worship, designed to help you, point you hopefully towards God's faithfulness. But they made that the very thing that was righteousness. And it isn't. In my church growing up, you know what? I won't even get specific on it. How's that? I'm going to let you determine that in your own context. Every person drifts towards elevating tradition, towards commandment, and taking commandment and reducing it to tradition. When in fact, let tradition be what it is. They're going to graciously change over the years. What God has commanded us, however, to love Him with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, to obey Him, that doesn't change ever. That is, our lives are to represent God's holiness, His character, and His nature, and that never changes. That is your digital devotional for today. What that means for you is that sometimes you got to do some self-inventory, right? And if you find yourself holding things against other believers, other churches, other ministries, you need to go to the scriptures and determine if what you're holding against somebody or what you're upholding in your heart is really God's commandment, or if it is just tradition. If it represents His character and His nature, His holiness, it's commandment. If it's just designed to help you remember certain things or emphasize the values, of your body of people, it's probably tradition. And that's okay if those change. Guys, that's Mark chapter 7. That's a little bit of the first 5-6 verses there. Hope y'all are doing well. I see Brian Craig. Good morning to you. Diana, thank you for the compliment. Always great having you here. And if you're watching for the first time, we do this every single day. Get my coffee, get things rocking and rolling, getting the Bible together, all while we are in quarantine and sheltering in place. Even though that's technically lifted here in Georgia, we are still sheltering for a bit longer. And guys, hope you're doing well. Hope you're staying safe. If you've got anything that we need to be praying for you about, you can post it in the comments. And we'll see you right here at 7:30 every single day, Monday through Friday. Although my wife just shouted across the room, but not tomorrow. So tomorrow, what time are you and I getting on here tomorrow, honey?
We usually get on 8:30.
So my lovely wife, the other half, she'll be joining me tomorrow. We're doing this together each Wednesday moving forward. We're doing it together, and we'll be right here at 8:30 tomorrow. She just posted it. And Amanda, good morning. What up, cuz? Good to have you here. And love to all you. Have a great day. Stay safe. Be healthy. And more than anything else, follow Jesus with all your heart. Give him your best. Love you.